We see the GDPR as heralding really a new era in the regulation and processing of personal data. And by that we mean that the GDPR is bringing in amplified and expanded rights for individuals to control their destiny in terms of the data that's collected and processed. And then correspondingly, it's putting a whole range of new obligations on organisations that collect and process personal data to ensure that they're meeting those rights. And on top of that then, for data protection authorities like the Irish DPC, it's giving us a whole new enforcement focus. We're going to have a range of sanctions we can impose on organisations that contravene data protection legislation, and we're also going to have the capability to impose very large administrative fines. So really, the GDPR is about putting the individual much more in the driver's seat now, and organisations are going to have to respect that individuals have a right to know and understand what personal data is being collected and processed, how long it's going to be retained, and for what purpose it's being collected. We see that some sectors now that engage very strongly with us, for example, the insurance or banking sectors, they now have very strong compliance and education programs to try and augment the standards of compliance across their sectors. Of course, it's a moving target for them all the time. But then in other areas, we see from the individual complaints that we receive that organisations really still yet have not come to terms with the fact that individuals have very strong rights under existing data protection law. So for example, we see that 52% of the complaints that the Irish DPC receives are still around access requests, organisations refusing to comply with an individual's request to have a copy of their personal data. So we're seeing a lot of organisations are still sending SMS messages or phoning up individuals whose mobile numbers they've collected without having their consent to direct market them. So actually on that, we're planning to run 2 big information campaigns at the start of March this year, one on access rights of individuals, one on SMS direct marketing, and we're targeting those messages at both individuals and organisations. First of all, I think education of the individual about what their rights under data protection legislation are and under the Charter of Fundamental Rights are going to be a good starter, and the Irish DPC hopes to play its role in that as we roll out our GDPR awareness campaign. The second thing I think then is for organisations to take up their obligations under the law and to implement strong programmes of awareness and training in their organisations. Time and time again, we see big organisations that have good data governance programmes, but they're only as strong as the weakest link of their frontline staff. So really ongoing staff awareness and frontline staff training are necessary. The third thing I think that is going to engender a culture of compliance is the enforcement focus under the GDPR. The fact that administrative fines are going to be administered against organisations that contravene the law, sanctions are going to be taken, there's likely to be publicity around the sanctions that are administered. That's going to help drive a culture of awareness. An interesting feature of the GDPR is also the fact that it increases the rights of data subjects in terms of their ability to take civil actions against organisations that contravene their data protection rights and obtain compensation from those organisations. So I really think we're going to see a big increase in terms of actions taken by individuals directly against organisations. There's a huge presence clearly of tech and internet multinationals here, and correspondingly we've had to develop a huge expertise in regulating those types of entities and social media companies. Since I came on board towards the end of 2014, we've had a quadrupling of the budget of the DPC. It's now over 7.5 million per annum. We've been able to recruit large numbers of additional staff. We now have in excess of 60 staff here at the DPC. We've opened a new office in Dublin with over 30 staff based there. In particular, from my point of view, at Deputy Commissioner level, we've expanded our numbers to 4, and recent new recruits that we've added on that team have been a litigation specialist lawyer, and a technology consultant specialist. So we've increased our senior management capability considerably. We've also recruited and focused on recruiting into our multinational and technology team. We've brought in systems analysts, security specialists, software developers in order to deal with the quantities of cases that we now have that are technology related. I mean, we often talk about the fact that every company is now a technology company. Every company now is a data company as well, and these types of skills are critical in terms of delivering on our role. So in terms of, you asked me how we feel, we are about to start a recruitment campaign, or in fact it's already underway for 2017, where we're going to recruit an additional 30 to 35 staff. And again, we're confident that we can attract industry specialists again who want to come and work at the regulatory authority in terms of the cutting edge cases that we're dealing with at the intersection of technology and data protection law. The more I study the GDPR, the more I see how clever it is in its principles-based, technology-neutral format as it is, because I think the GDPR is going to allow us the ability to regulate all of those new technologies like drones, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, albeit that I think there's going to be the challenge for industry to come up with new ways itself to deliver on things like the transparency and notice requirements to individuals, to decide what affirmative action that constitutes consent is going to look like under those new technologies. So that, I think, is going to be a challenge for industry as well as the regulators. But I think we talked earlier about the fact that the GDPR is about putting the individual in the driver's seat, allowing them control, ensuring that organisations respect their fundamental right. And I think if all of the industry providers in those new technology spaces start out with that orientation towards what they're doing, then we can achieve compliance and we can achieve the benefits of technology for society and for economies, but also have as strong a protection as possible for the individual in terms of their rights.
Enjoyed this video? Click here for more news from SiliconRepublic.com or follow us on social media.